Which Robin is the most powerful? Okay, but how about if we also add in the Robins that exist across the multiverse and from Elseworlds? Number 10. Triss Plover. Triss comes from a pretty dark future where all of humanity, it turns out, is living on a spaceship, destined to find a new home somewhere out in the cosmos to settle. The space vessel she lives on is known as Gotham, and she works as a farmer on the giant vessel. However, she ends up getting pursued by the authorities and decides to join the vigilante Batman. He tells her of the fact that there was a malfunction and their ship is actually now off course. Triss joins him as his Robin, and together the two of them manage to correct the ship's computer, putting them back on a proper course. Think WALL-E kind of, but if it were Batman and Robin teaming up to fix things instead of WALL-E and a reluctant Eve. Unfortunately, despite being a kind of cool apocalyptic future Robin, Triss still turned herself into the authorities in the end and was turned into fertilizer, after she realized that it would take over 300 years for the ship to arrive at their now correctly programmed destination. Yeah, that's gotta be a pretty depressing revelation. Number 9. Earth 2 Robin. The original Earth 2 Robin was an alternate version of Dick Grayson who never became Nightwing but instead continued on with the mantle Robin well into his adulthood. He fought crime alongside the daughter of Batman and Catwoman, Helena Wayne, also known as the Vigilante Huntress. Being that Earth 2 Robin was from the Golden Age, he's got a lot of weird knowledge and skills because, well, Golden Age comics, including medicinal and surgical skills. Thanks, Batman. He also was technically the original Robin despite now being considered an alternate due to a reorganization of the continuity following Crisis on Infinite Earths, and then again during Infinite Crisis, and then again following Flashpoint. Wow, that's a lot of resets. Though this version of Robin wouldn't be around to see all those resets, as despite his long list of skills, he died attempting to protect the newly formed Earth during the Crisis on Infinite Earths event. So he only lives on at this point in our hearts and in our old mags. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more Bat lists, I want to give you those Bat lists, so be sure to let us know that you like them by clicking that like button, and hey, why not share this list while you're at it? Help us find the people out in the world that also love Robins. Number 8. Robin 89. This alternate version of Robin made his first appearance in issue number 1 of Batman 89, a new limited series that takes place in the Burtonverse. One of my favorite verses. As a nod to the fact that Marlon Wayans was set to play Robin in the Burtonverse before Tim Burton left the Batman films, this version of him is black, which I think is pretty awesome. Initially, Marlon would have played Robin in the sequel, but the team actually decided instead to have him first appear in the third film, you know, the one that never happened, as Joel Schumacher then took over, introducing his own version of Robin in Batman Forever. We haven't seen much of this comic book version of what Marlon Wayans' Robin could have been, but what we did get is to see the mysterious figure who is Robin, likely still named Richard Grayson in this reality, take on Batman near the end of issue number 1 and hold his own against the Dark Knight. And so for that alone, and the fact that I'm really excited for Batman 89, I felt like I should include him. So hopefully you agree with me and you're also excited about Batman 89. Or if you're not excited, hey, let me know in the comments. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, you know what I mean? Number 7. Gotham City Garage Nightwing. Nightwing in this reality is known for fixing up bikes and wearing a leather jacket with no shirt underneath. Sounds pretty sweaty to me. He is recruited to help break into Lex Luthor's compound by Catwoman, and the pair of them are also joined by Kara. His skills here don't just include fighting and acrobatics, but also his driving skills, which are pretty impressive. Aside from that, Nightwing also has his tricked out bike, which adds to his power set. In this reality, he is rivals with Jason Todd, who himself gets his butt whooped by Kara. Nightwing in this reality is different in the sense that he is more selfish than his main continuity counterpart, and is willing to leave others behind in order to save himself. Number 6. Damian Wayne. What would an alternate Robin list be without a few of the main continuity Robins, of which we have a plethora of alternates already, as the role has changed hands throughout the years. I'm not going to list all of the Robins here, so if there's one that you're a huge fan of and I don't list them, please don't be offended, but I am going to mention a few that I just think are the most powerful and deserve to be mentioned, with some powerful Robin alternates from other realities and Elseworlds peppered in the mix there. Damian, of course, being one of those main Robins that I would like to talk to you about. Damian Wayne is another Robin who initially didn't have a problem with killing his opponents. This is due to the fact that he was raised among the League of Assassins, in part training with his mother, Talia al Ghul, herself a masterful and accomplished assassin and fighter. Damian has recently left the Robin mantle and his father's side to seemingly find himself in his own new Robin series. Although the series is called Robin, Damian claims to have turned his back on the Bat and is looking to find out who he really is outside of his father's shadow, turning to his mother for some guidance guidance this time around, and also looking inside himself. Which I think, Damian's still pretty young, so that makes a lot of sense to me. Number 5. Deathlok. Deathlok is the Amalgam Universe version of Jason Todd. He is a combination of DC's Jason Todd, who was once known as Robin, Marvel's Midnight, and Marvel's Deathlok. In the Amalgam Universe, however, his name still remains Jason Todd, just to be clear. Jason was caught in an explosion and recovered by the villainous organization Hydra, who healed him and repaired him by turning him into a cyborg, making him into their agent and Deathlok. But prior to this, Jason was already a skilled fighter, albeit somewhat reckless, taking up the mantle of Moonwing when he worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. after Dick had left the mantle and S.H.I.E.L.D. to go attend university. However, Jason would later be dismissed from S.H.I.E.L.D. after making a grievous mistake while on duty, a mistake that even as Deathlok he still blamed his superiors for, confronting both Dick Grayson and S.H.I.E.L.D. director Bruce Wayne during a fight later on. Number 4. Jason Todd. When it comes to Jason Todd, he is powerful because he doesn't often hold back and he doesn't really give up. While he may have trauma that sometimes can leave him vulnerable, his redefinition of the Bat family moral code means that he's a touch more ruthless than your standard Robin. Okay, maybe a lot more ruthless. At least more ruthless after he left the mantle of Robin and became Red Hood. However, even during his time as Robin, Jason was a determined young man who, even when beaten, would never back down or give up in a fight. Currently, however, Jason is also a masterful sword fighter and weapons expert who is not afraid to kill those who get in his way, which is kind of what gives him an edge, I think, in comparison to some of the other Robins. Number 3. Robin King. Robin King is actually not an alternate version of any of our Robins from the main continuity. Gasp! Instead, Robin King is an alternate version of Bruce Wayne, who was inspired by a Robin's cheerful song at his parents' funeral in this reality. It was the young Bruce Wayne here who killed his parents due to the fact that he was inherently prone to violence and homicidal tendencies, even from a young age. Because this version of Robin is so murderous and dangerous, he could definitely be one of the most powerful Robins out there. Also, if you thought Jason had at times questionable morals or methods, the Robin King truly just blows him out of the water for that. Number 2. Dick Grayson. I think Dick has proven to be the most capable and powerful version of Robin that we've ever seen. This is likely thanks to a combination of Nightwing's personality and years of experience, considering that he was the very first Robin and has been around since the early days of Batman's vigilante career. He's also super flexible. I think he's also the most flexible Robin, which I know y'all might be thinking that doesn't equal power, but trust me, flexibility is hard and it is very powerful, I think. Do not underestimate someone who's very flexible. Dick even proved himself as a good fit as Bruce's heir when he himself took up the cape and cowl, filling in as Batman after he was presumed dead, but was really just MIA. Nightwing brings to the table not only his skills as a fighter and acrobat, but also his sharp wit as a perceptive and smart detective, as well as his forensic skills, or as I said once, his chemist skills. I called him a chemist once and people were like, that's not a thing. But he does have forensic skills, which is chemistry, so I feel like it still kind of goes hand in hand. I defend it. I would say when it comes to all-around Robin power, Nightwing is one of the most balanced, which generally gives him a leg up in comparison to the other Robins who tend to dominate in a specific area but usually lack somewhat in another. Basically, they're usually really good at like one or two things, but everything else they're fluctuating. And I feel like Nightwing is pretty much like here, like he's just really good at a lot of stuff. Number 1. Dragon Slayer. Dragon Slayer is probably the most powerful of the Robins that we've seen so far. He's also definitely the most metal. He comes from the Dark Multiverse, more specifically the Dark Multiverse Dark Knight's Metal series. He actually sort of has powers as well, coming with an electric guitar that also happens to be an axe. He plays it with a kryptonite pick, using its sound to create sonic blasts and even energy constructs. And okay, yeah, so he doesn't necessarily have powers, but he has a powerful weapon, so I'm gonna count it, because it's like magically powerful. Dragon Slayer's Nightwing, aka Richard Grayson, is definitely the most badass of all the Robins here, and despite his very brief appearance, is in theory the most powerful. At least his brief appearance by comparison to some of the other ones. Although Tris Plover was also brief. Number 10. Dog. Dog, spelled D-A-W-G, is the companion of Lobo over at DC. Mostly Lobo just tolerates Dog's presence though, and doesn't think of Dog as his own pet. Dog might look like the bulldogs of Earth, but he's actually an alien who just looks like a bulldog. He's known for being quite durable and, like Lobo, can survive in the vacuum of space. Dog also sometimes is seen smoking and was originally recognizable in the comics by his his cross collar, which actually resembled the red iron cross, a symbol that Lobo also wore back then, so they had kind of like matching little necklaces. The modern version of dog no longer appears to be associated with this symbol. Fans of Lobo might be fans of dog, although it should be noted that in the original New Earth continuity, Lobo was actually the one who ended up killing that alien after Dog himself was possessed. Number 9. Comet the Super Horse. Comet is an interesting one and really ranks lower not because he lacks power, but because he's secretly actually a man. Or a centaur, really. A centaur that was accidentally turned into a full-on horse by Circe, but who could also become a human whenever a magical comet flew by. While Comet made for a very useful and loyal animal sidekick to Supergirl, who also came with a slew of other abilities including flight, telepathy, and immortality, he also was kind of a creeper. You see, Byron, Comet's original name when he was a centaur, actually falls in love with Supergirl, and when he takes his human form for that short while, he decides to try and woo her. He becomes, I think his name is Bill Starr. He's a rodeo man. He rides the horses. He rides the bulls? What do people ride at rodeos? Bulls? I think bulls, I don't know. I've never been to a rodeo. Someone take me to a rodeo. Byron decides it's best if Supergirl never knows that he is actually also her horse. And I get it, you know, it's complicated. But still, that's pretty messed up, Byron. Like, you make a loyal animal sidekick, but not a very honest human love interest. Although I guess with Comet, you're like, I get a magical horse and I get a boyfriend, which maybe back in the day was like, I don't know, cool for girls of the time. They were like, I want a flying horse that can also turn into my boyfriend. What a weird time. Or maybe that's just what people thought girls wanted, I don't know. Number 8. Tippy Toe. I mean, you gotta give it up for Tippy Toe. Tippy Toe is Doreen Green's, aka Squirrel Girl's, main animal sidekick currently in the comics. Before Tippy, it was Monkey Joe, and of course Squirrel Girl can have a whole team of squirrel sidekicks, if she wants to, as that's kind of her thing, communicating with squirrels and convincing them to team up with her. Really convincing many people to team up with her and be her friends. Tippy Toe is often recognized by her bright pink bow. She doesn't have any superpowers per se, but is a very smart, resourceful, and inspiring squirrel. She has demonstrated that she has skills as a leader, leading an entire squirrel army on Doreen's behalf. She's gone up against the likes of AIM and Thanos, and not only survived, but also helped to beat them too. Okay. Number 7. Eagly. One of the most ridiculous but quickly becoming one of the greatest animal sidekicks of all time is Eagly. Eagly is Peacemaker's sidekick in the DCEU. He appears in Peacemaker's HBO Max self-titled series. So far, Eagly has been a great companion to Peacemaker. We've seen Peacemaker use his animal sidekick to distract enemies, and have also seen that Peacemaker doesn't just see Eagly as his crime-fighting partner, but also very much as like his pet and his friend. Eagly also seems to be very well trained and to have a strong bond with Peacemaker. There is no doubt in my mind Eagly would probably do whatever Chris asked of him, and likely would fight just as hard and ruthlessly in Peacemaker's fight for peace. Eagly the Eagle, what a great name. Number 6. Jeff the Landshark. Jeffrey the Landshark is definitely one of my all-time personal favorite animal sidekicks in the Marvel Universe. I honestly would have ranked him higher if there weren't so many star animal sidekicks on this list. For me, in my heart, he is number 1, but I felt weird giving the number 1 spot to Jeff because there's so many other really awesome ones too. Technically, Jeff is a little monster, not quite an animal, but he's animal-like enough for me to put him on this list, so just roll with it. Jeff has been the partner to Gwenpool, Elsa Bloodstone, Deadpool, and most recently Kate Bishop's Hawkeye in his own self-titled series, Marvel Infinity webtoon series, It's Jeff. Also, if you haven't read It's Jeff by Kelly Thompson and Guri Hiru, you need to pause this video and go scroll through at least one issue on the Marvel Unlimited app. You can start with issue 1 if you want. All the issues are great though, honestly, so you can't really start in a wrong spot. Then you can come back and resume watching. And if you fell in love with that series, like me, there is going to be a follow-up one this year, so don't worry, Marvel has even more Jeff coming your way. Number 5. Redwing. Redwing is the animal companion of Sam Wilson. In the series Falcon and the Winter Soldier on Disney+, the Falcon we know as Redwing in the comics was swapped out for a drone companion, which also shares the name of its its 616 counterpart. Redwing was actually the reason that we thought for a hot minute that Sam himself might be a mutant, and the reason that Sam questioned his origin and with it his potential power set. You see, Wilson and Redwing could actually communicate telepathically, which Sam thought could be as a result of latent mutant powers emerging. In reality, their telepathic link was actually a result of the machinations of the evil Red Skull. It turned out this link was created using the Cosmic Cube. To this day though, Sam still has a telepathic link with Redwing, and Redwing still fights by Wilson's side, even during his time in the comics as Captain America. And probably his future time as Captain America, since he's probably going to be returning to that role. Yay! Number 4. Topo. Topo was Aquaman's ally and pet back in the New Earth continuity. Topo is an octopus, or at least he was an octopus originally. The Prime Earth version of him looks a bit more like a cuttlefish octo hybrid to me, but based on his tentacles, I think he's still meant to be an octopus, just a much more giant octopus in comparison to the original. Or maybe the original one just got real big in this universe. The New Earth version of Topo was a purple octopus who is known for his superior dexterity with his tentacles and his super strength. Aside from those more unique traits, he also had all the abilities of a regular octopus. In the Prime Earth continuity, Topo was called upon to help King Arthur, aka Aquaman, to defend Atlantis, and later on to help him infiltrate it during his exile. He's great. Number 3. Lockjaw. Lockjaw has to be one of the best animal sidekicks around, simply because he also happens to be one of the most powerful out there. Lockjaw is the animal companion of Black Bolt, king of the Inhumans, but he also serves and is a member of the Inhuman royal family. He's a big teleporting doggo who represents a bulldog, and like the other Inhumans, gets his powers from the Terrigen Mists and process of Terrigenesis. Having a teleporting dog would definitely be one of the coolest and most useful things. Teleportation is rad. When it comes to Lockjaw's range and capabilities, by the way, he's a powerful teleporter just in regards to the Marvel Universe, not even just like in regards to animals in the Marvel Universe. He can teleport you all the way into space and can even take you to other dimensions. Number 2. Ace the Bat Hound. Honestly, we could probably just have a list of best doggo sidekicks. There are lots of them in the comic book world. I'm not sure actually if there are more monkeys slash gorillas slash apes or more dogs, but I bet it's pretty close between those two categories. Ace the Bat Hound wasn't actually really Bruce's dog, but instead was a dog that Batman and Robin found and then decided to adopt to use in a case, getting his help to locate his owner who had been kidnapped. Ace proved to be a heroic dog, and as such Ace became the Bat Hound, until he was returned to his rescued owner. Even after Ace would occasionally be called upon to help Batman in his time of need, with the given excuse of Bruce Wayne claiming he just really liked having the animal around and wanted to have him visit Wayne Manor every now and then because he was good company, which his rightful owner actually agreed to. During Rebirth in the 2016 Batman series, Ace's backstory was changed and the doggo gets a super sweet and heartbreaking origin story. Here the dog suffered trauma at the hands of the Joker, being made into one of his pets and then basically abandoned by the Joker. Alfred pities the dog, who was dressed up as an Ace card when found initially. Alfred takes in and trains Ace, rescuing Ace and turning the doggo into a good boy, intended as a holiday gift for Bruce. Although that part of Ace's story goes right over Bruce's head. He's like, "You didn't get me a gift, Alfred." Alfred's like, "I mean, I just trained this dog and it was a lot of work, but sure, yeah, I forgot to get you a gift, Bruce. Thanks." Number 1. Lockheed. Lockheed obviously is one of my all-time favorite animal companions, and there are surprisingly a lot of them that I was able to reminisce about while writing this list, and a lot of them that I love. Many who didn't even make my cut this time around, but honestly who still deserve to. But above them all, in my mind, is Lockheed. Though to be honest, the question of which Lock is the best from Marvel between Lockheed and Lockjaw is a pretty intense debate. Both are great animal sidekicks, and Lockjaw is just super OP as a teleporter in general. Lockheed isn't technically an animal and isn't as powerful as Inhuman's best friend Lockjaw, but what he lacks in power he makes up for in heart and in stealthiness. Lockheed was actually once an agent of S.W.O.R.D. and was basically Abigail Brand's undercover agent who was secretly keeping an eye on the X-Men at the time. However, Lockheed still will probably always remain most loyal to his bestie, Kitty Pryde, aka Captain Kate. He would defend her to the ends of the earth and actually left his homeworld, his civilization, and his fiancée behind just to go on adventures with Kate. He's like a little space dragon, which I guess makes Kate Marvel's mother of dragons? Either Kate or Jubilee I think deserves that title. Or both of them can share it, I'm fine with that. Since Jubilee's son is also literally kind of a dragon. Who would you want as your sidekick? Number 10. Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn might seem like a weird one to have on this list, and yeah, I'll give you that. But while Harley has long been known as a villain, starting off as the Joker's girlfriend and sidekick, over the years she has redeemed herself and even has become a hero, I would say. In fact, more recently in the comics, I would have said she was actually a member of the Bat family, and kind of for a time one of Batman and Ghostmaker's sidekicks. Harley might just be a human, but she has some pretty powerful plot armor thanks to her being a fan favorite and some impressive skill sets. Definitely not a character that you would want to underestimate, trust me. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to let us know by clicking that subscribe button. Number 9. War Machine. War Machine is another one who might seem weird to think of as a sidekick, but when it comes to the Marvel Universe, we're a little bit limited in terms of the options that we have available for sidekicks. So for Marvel, we're going to be considering close partners and seconds in command as sidekicks, because really a sidekick is kind of just that, a close associate who doesn't hold as much authority as their other counterpart. Which is exactly where War Machine started when it came to his relationship to Tony Stark's Iron Man. In fact, when James Rhodes first met Stark, Iron Man had just built his first set of armor and was looking to return home. Rhodes helped him get safely back to the States, and Stark offered him a job, which he initially declined. However, Rhodes would later come to accept Stark's offer, becoming his employee, personal pilot, and close friend and confidant, with Stark eventually passing on his mantle to Rhodey for a time, and later making him his own set of War Machine armor and hoping that he would kind of take over the role of Iron Man. Didn't work out too well that time because Tony kind of pretended that he was dead and he wasn't dead, so yeah, Rhodey didn't like that too much. Number 8. Robin. But just which Robin are we talking about? Well, I think for our part 1, it's only fair that I include the first and possibly most iconic, possibly the best, some might say, Robin. For most of us anyways, I imagine, or for some of us, Dick Grayson. Dick Grayson would go on to become the hero Nightwing, but before that, he was Batman's literal sidekick, Robin. Robin, in fact, has been a name that Batman has continued to use when it comes to his sidekicks, which have continued to appear and take over throughout Batman's history. Grayson is probably one of the most well-rounded when it comes to his abilities and his skill set among his roster of Robins. And although he's just a man, that really is saying something, considering that oftentimes we compare Robins to Batman, who among base level humans in the DC universe could be considered as probably the most powerful there is. Number 7. Falcon. Sam Wilson is currently known in the comics as Captain America and recently rejoined up with the Avengers under this name. Recruited by new team leader Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel. Between her, Steve, and Sam, there's a bit of confusion when using the term Cap. They have a little conversation in the newest Avengers series and gotta say it's pretty cute. Sam Wilson, however, became Captain America over time, but initially started out as Captain America's friend, ally, and partner, Falcon. To call him a sidekick honestly feels like a little bit of an understatement because, I mean, Sam Wilson, kind of like War Machine, kind of his own man in his own right, but compared to the leading star at the time in the comics of Steven Rogers, Falcon could be seen as such. After all, he was Steve's partner and Steve was kind of, you know, the more main character between them at the time. Number 6. Jubilee. Jubilee is one of my all-time favorite characters in the Marvel Universe and definitely in the realm of mutants. Honestly, maybe just one of my all-time favorite characters, like just in general, like even outside of comics, considering she was also one of my first cartoon crushes. She is a pretty powerful character too, and I know a lot of people think of Jubilee as the mutant who can create fireworks from her hands, but in reality she has a lot more going on than just that. What Jubilee is really doing with her abilities is happening at a molecular level, with her creating explosions that Emma Frost believed even had the potential to be subatomic, putting her at a potential nuclear level threat in terms of how much destruction and damage she could cause. And what's more, we even recently got to see Jubilee test this theory while aboard the Collector's Museum space vessel in Exterminators issue number 5, which actually came out earlier this year in 2023. Another reason I personally need to catch up on Exterminators. If you're also wondering why Jubilee is being considered as a sidekick, well, this is because she initially started out as kind of one of Wolverine's young proteges in the comics, even becoming jealous when he brought Android disguised as little girl LCD into the fold. Number 5. Captain Marvel Bunny. Oh my gosh, Captain Marvel Bunny, here we go. How could I forget Hoppy? Hoppy is often the forgotten sidekick of the Shazam family for DC Comics. Hoppy is a bunny rabbit who also received the powers of Shazam. Known as Captain Marvel Bunny. He received his powers simply by uttering the word Shazam one day as he tried to emulate his favorite hero, Captain Marvel, who in his reality of Earth C+ was a fictional character. Hoppy has not only traveled to the pre-crisis Earth S to team up with the Marvel family, he also at one point teamed up with another bunny-themed hero from the DC multiverse, Captain Carrot, another often unsung hero. Hoppy also comes from the early days of Captain Marvel, back when Captain Marvel was still with his original publisher, Fawcett Comics. Although it might seem odd for me to put Captain Marvel Bunny above some of these other folks that I just talked about that are all really awesome, it is important to note that he has powers similar to Shazam, which oddly would make him kind of one of the more powerful sidekicks on this list, even though he is a bunny. Number 4. Rogue. Rogue is one of my all-time favorite characters, so of course I'm gonna have her on this list if I can, because I love talking about Rogue. And in a way, I kinda can have her on this list. She is another of Wolverine's young female mutant sidekicks, likely the most powerful of those that I've chosen to list here. Oddly enough, especially for a loner character like Logan, he has many young proteges. Rogue is impressive because she can basically do just about anything, considering that her mutant power allows her to adopt the mutant powers of others through a simple touch. Not only that, but she can also use her powers to drain the life energy, memories, powers, and even full-on consciousness in some cases of those around her. And now she has a lot more control over her abilities, which is great. Number 3. Wonder Girl. Wonder Girl! There have actually been a few to use this name in the comics, and each one has been sort of posed as the kind of like mini Wonder Woman. While generally Diana fights solo or with the Justice League, Wonder Girl has always been a character that I've thought of as Wonder Woman's sidekick, in the sense that the two characters usually have a mentor-mentee relationship with one another, with Diana often offering guidance when it comes to Wonder Girl's training. For this point, I'd like to focus on my favorite Wonder Girl, Donna Troy. Donna Troy in some respects is like an exact copy of Wonder Woman, which means she actually has a power set very similar to Diana's. However, she generally is known as being not quite as skilled as Diana is, which also makes sense considering that she's a bit younger and she doesn't have quite as impressive an arsenal of weapons and magical items at her disposal. However, she does have her lasso of persuasion, which can be used to encourage people to do what she asks of them, assuming her willpower is stronger than her target's. So it works a lot, but not all the time. Number 2. Kitty Pryde. To call Kitty a sidekick might seem weird, but when you think about it, for a long time she was basically like the little kid sister of the X-Men team. Not only that, but she is another of the chosen few that Wolverine decided to take under his wing. As we've already established, he's basically had a few young female sidekicks throughout the years. Wolverine may have even been one of the first reluctant daddy archetypes in mainstream media. Kitty Pryde is one of the most powerful of these female sidekicks that Wolverine has had, if you ask me. Her mutant powers allow her to phase through solid objects around her, and even have allowed her to float or fly in the past as well. Not only that, but Kitty can also extend her powers using them to phase objects along with her and even other people. Oh yeah, and she can also like just phase parts of herself as well, so it's really useful in a fight. Makes her pretty much untouchable, but she'll definitely make contact with you. And I would not want to fight Kitty Pryde because, I mean, she was kind of trained in part by Wolverine. Number 1. Kid Flash. Kid Flash is probably one of the most powerful sidekicks around. I'm a huge Flash fan when it comes to that power set. I just think super speed is always one of the most superior powers out there. Like, it's either for me like something psionic or super speed. I'm just saying. It doesn't just give you the ability to run really fast, it also allows you to do so many things insanely fast. Super speed powers in the DC multiverse often are also connected with super genius levels of intelligence and the ability to time travel. Some can also phase as well. When it comes to Wally West as Kid Flash, he has a ton of abilities. He can do all that stuff and more. Now granted, when he was younger, he might not have been able to do all of these things, but currently his long list of abilities includes super fast healing, manipulating the air to create strong gusts of winds, traveling to other worlds and dimensions, phasing, and even healing others and creating energy constructs. Oh, and did I also mention that he's also like the fastest speedster out there? And he started as a sidekick, so I think that's pretty impressive. Number 10. Stepford Cuckoos. The Stepford Cuckoos, also known as the 5-in-1 and later as the 4-in-1, are the students and clones of Emma Frost. They are also often referred to as kind of being like her children because, well, I mean, they were kind of made from like her stolen eggs, so in a way, they kind of are, at least from a genetic standpoint. Emma herself has taught them, and while you might argue that you need all 5 of them to kind of equal one Emma Frost, we've also seen them accomplish some pretty impressive things even when on their own. I'd also argue the fact that there are multiple of them is actually kind of more of a pro than a con, even if it means they need to combine find their powers to be at their most powerful. I mean, them being 5 separate individuals means that they can actually be in more places at once than Emma physically can. And the really cool thing is they all basically share like kind of a hive mind, so no matter where they are, they can remain in constant communication at all times, and can always be in sync with one another, through somewhat sharing kind of a psyche as well. The 5 Stepford cuckoos were recently all returned back to life thanks to the resurrection protocols of Krakoa, and include Esme, Phoebe, Sophie, Celeste, and of course Irma.
Number 9. Doop. Is he a sidekick, or is he more of a mascot? I don't know, but originally, he was the original X-Force team's videographer. But when that team became Ecstatics, he was clearly the most different member on the team, and that's probably because Doop is one of the most capable green beans I have ever seen. According to Captain America, Doop is the product of a Cold War US military experiment, and was instrumental in the fall of the Soviet Union. Somehow. But apparently, he also comes from a place called Marginalia, the world between worlds and a place that begins where the story ends. Whatever that means. Doop is unable to learn English, and so he speaks in a language all of his own that everyone somehow can understand, but it's his powers that are just out of this world. He has possible omniscience, he's strong and durable enough to defeat Thor, he can heal from super serious wounds in seconds and resurrect himself, he has insane levels of speed, size alteration, energy projection, psionic fire, blasts, and shields. He can perform Doopish magic, his body contains a nightmare dimension known as Doopland, which he can access by turning himself inside out, and he has the power of the funk. Compared to the other members of the Ecstatics, Doop is a powerhouse. Doop later joined the X-Men, becoming the receptionist of the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, but while he was doing that, he was also tasked by Wolverine to take care of the threats that Wolverine could not handle because he was too busy. So, yeah.
Number 8. Donna Troy. Donna Troy was once known in the past as Wonder Girl, the sidekick of Wonder Woman, who also was kinda like her little kid sister. On our part 1, some drew attention in the comments to the fact that these sidekicks, during their time as sidekicks, were not more powerful than their superhero counterparts. And to clarify a little bit, these to me are simply folks who were at one point sidekicks, who we might at some point in their timeline consider more powerful than their superhero counterparts. So while Donna, I would say during her time as a sidekick, was really never more powerful than Diana, there was a time when she was actually profoundly more powerful. So that's why we're counting her on this list. So if you're like, there wasn't a time when Donna was a sidekick and she beat Wonder Woman, I think you're right on that. I'm not arguing that point. In a future where Donna Troy became the villain known as Troya though, Donna not only killed all of her fellow superpowered allies and friends, but even turned on her fellow Amazon, Diana, defeating and killing her as well. Sad. Sad! Don't worry though, Donna gotta fight her evil self, so yay.
Number 7. Miles Morales. A lot of people on the first part of this list suggested Miles Morales, and for me, it feels a little insulting to call him a sidekick. Miles Morales just is Spider-Man. The second one, sure, but he is kind of his own hero. That's how I've always seen him at least. But if he is actually considered a sidekick, then he's absolutely more powerful than his main hero. Sorry. Miles has essentially all the same abilities as Spider-Man himself, but then he has some that are wholly his own, and they're actually really useful. His signature difference, in my eyes, is his venom. This is like a form of bioelectricity that he can emit from his body and use in some really cool ways. He can do punches and beams and blasts, and he can even infuse it into his webbing. But Miles is also able to use spider camouflage to make his whole body and even his clothes and costume go invisible. While technically the second Spider-Man from the Ultimate Universe, following the original's passing, he eventually trained and worked with not only 616 Spider-Man, but in a weird twist of fate, the original Spider-Man from that universe as well. And then when he came into the 616 Earth universe, he has pretty much been his own hero on the Avengers and other teams, while occasionally, sometimes, once in a while, working with Peter Parker. He's his own person, okay? He's not a sidekick, but we're gonna use him anyways, because this is what you wanted.
Number 6. Wasp. Janet Van Dyne's the Wasp is not necessarily someone I also would consider as a one-for-one sidekick per se to Hank Pym's Ant-Man. So, well, I as well am going to count her for this list because, well, I love her and I do think that in the end she has proven herself to be a more powerful and definitely more long-lasting hero than Hank. I do think it's important to clarify that to me, she's always been more of like a partner to Ant-Man than I would say like a sidekick. However, Ant-Man back in the day was definitely more the star between the two, so I suppose one could consider her to be more of a support character. In truth, Marvel doesn't really kind of like have typical sidekick roles anymore, unless you go like way back in their history than they did. Now, this is likely because Stan Lee himself actually actively disliked the idea of sidekicks, so they pretty much ended up being kind of like phased out. However, I do try to balance many of my lists between the big two being Marvel and DC, the big two comic book publishers, with a sprinkling in of some indie properties every now and then. And for that reason, I include folks like the Wasp and, you know, some of the X-Men who were once younger members teamed up with older heroes, which I touched on a lot more of them on the part 1. For Jan's part, I would like to argue that she simply proved herself more as an Avenger, even going on to be appointed as team leader for the Avengers for a time, and I would say doing a bang-up job of being a team leader, something Hank never accomplished in his day, so there you go.
Number 5. Hit Girl. We don't really talk about Kick-Ass so much, and that makes sense when talking about powerful heroes because there isn't really anyone from the Kick-Ass comic who is really superpowered. But in terms of sheer capability, Mindy McCready, aka Hit Girl and the sidekick of the hero Big Daddy, is probably the most capable character in the whole thing. Mindy can take out hordes of armed mob henchmen in seconds with her double-bladed polearm, and she does, tearing through enemies with such finesse that she makes it look like a dance. Her unusually refined skills are all thanks to the pretty ruthless training she undergoes at the hands of her father, Big Daddy. Although it's not revealed till later, Big Daddy was a cop who essentially went rogue and tricked Mindy into training her whole childhood to become Hit Girl and fighting crime with a bogus story that her mother had been taken out by a particular mafia boss. Using this made-up backstory as motivation, the two trained in all forms of lethal weaponry and martial arts to become strong enough to take on their target. Although Big Daddy himself isn't a pushover, he does not have the same kind of fighting skill as Mindy. Being able to take out groups of armed grown men in melee combat is a testament to just how strong she is, and she isn't even an adult, so just imagine what she could eventually achieve. Potentially, maybe.
Number 4. Nightwing. I left Nightwing off my part 1 because I was honestly worried about people coming for me for putting him on a list, basically saying he's better than Batman. But, you know, after discussing with Adam and after discussing also with Andrew, I feel like honestly we all at Top 10 Nerd agree that Dick Grayson has gotten to a place where we could see him superseding Batman as the greatest dark detective there is. Something that I feel like Dick has that Batman doesn't, or at least doesn't necessarily in the same way, is a close connection to those who he cares about most. In other words, Dick basically has more friends. He's more popular. Not to say that Batman, you know, doesn't have friends and he doesn't have people that he can rely on, but for Dick, these people are more like a family to him than just close confidants and colleagues. Dick lets people in and is ultimately a more vulnerable character in comparison to Bruce Wayne's Batman. And I think there is a real strength in that vulnerability for him as a hero. He's also proven himself to be a worthy heir to the Batman mantle, actually taking it up himself after Batman was thought to be dead. But at the same time, his real power comes from not needing to wear and use that mantle to be a great hero. In fact, I would say that Dick has done better under his Nightwing mantle than he ever did as Batman, and probably would have done better when he was filling in for Batman to just wear that mantle when standing in. However, Grayson was also aware that at the time, Gotham needed Batman and not Nightwing, and so literally basically walked around kind of trying to do his best like Bruce impersonation, which, let's be honest, Dick Grayson doesn't need to do to be great, and also he is not Bruce. Honestly, I think Bruce did such a great job of raising his son to be a better hero in his own right, making Nightwing an even better hero than Batman ultimately could ever be. Now you can come for me in the comments if you want, that's fine.
Number 3. Cassandra Cain. After just talking about Nightwing, now we're gonna talk about another member of the Bat family. There have been many members of the Bat family, all with different strengths and weaknesses, and they all have the potential to potentially be better, potentially, than their mentor, potentially Batman. It's kind of the whole reason for having them, to create better versions of himself. But Cassandra Cain, she redefined the whole role of Batgirl. She's easily the toughest Batgirl and arguably the most skilled member of the Bat family, mainly because of her skill with hand-to-hand combat. Thanks to her highly unique fighting style, coupled with all of her training at the hands of her parents and everyone else, she could easily defeat her predecessor, Barbara Gordon, but even Batman would be given a run for his money in a straight-up fistfight. Cassandra has beaten her mother, Lady Shiva, and her father, David Cain, and they are two of the best fighters in DC's landscape. She was brought into the world and trained by the League of Assassins to be the one who is all and the ultimate bodyguard for Ra's al Ghul. She received even more training from Bronze Tiger, Merlin the Archer, Batman himself, Lady Shiva, Oracle, and Black Canary. She has near meta-human levels of speed, immense resistance to pain, and she can read people's body language, which allows her to mimic anyone's fighting style and predict their next moves. I'd say she's better. I don't know. don't know, you decide.
Number 2, Toro. Toro was the Human Torch Jim Hammond's sidekick way back when. And when Toro was initially the sidekick of the Human Torch, it was believed he had powers very similar to the Human Torch. He had flame powers that he was born with, being the son of Fred Raymond, who actually once worked for the man who created the Human Torch. Because, you know, we're talking about the android Human Torch here. Professor Phineas T. Horton. While initially Toro's parents believed their son, Thomas Toro Raymond, was a mutant due to his fire immunity powers, it would actually later be revealed that Toro was actually an Inhuman with a latent Inhuman gene activating his abilities. Well, he underwent Terrigenesis, but anyways. Later on, he'd even learn that his powers weren't even solely based on flame generation, immunity, and manipulation, but instead were based in the wheelhouse of basically chemical transformation, with him being able to create and manipulate both elemental and chemical reactions in both his body and the area immediately surrounding his body, which oddly makes him more versatile than the hero he played sidekick to initially, Hammond's Human Torch. He just didn't know at the time.
And finally, in at number 1, it's Kato. Look, the Green Hornet is no pushover. He is a skilled hand-to-hand fighter and has 2 special weapons he uses to incapacitate his criminals, one with knockout gas and the other with electricity. But Kato, his sidekick, he's just straight up better. He makes the Green Hornet look almost useless in comparison. Reading through Green Hornet Year 1, which I highly recommend, Kato is clearly the more skilled of the 2, with most of the fight panels being dedicated to his handiwork. He even trains Green Hornet to be a better fighter, and yet Kato remains the sidekick, which is kind of odd. Kato has spent his life training in martial arts. Kato also has a mastery of Bushido, the set of codes that governs the samurai way of life, and it's that way of life that led him to serve the Green Hornet. Although he is most often seen pummeling bad guys with his bare fists because he's just that skilled, he can also use traditional martial arts weapons like the bow staff and nunchaku. The thing with Kato is that in the live action TV show, he was played by frickin' Bruce Lee. You can't really get much better than that. And when the show went across the ocean to Eastern audiences, it was literally renamed to the Kato Show. Green Hornet brings in the money and is apparently the brains of this partnership, but Kato is basically everything else.
Number 10, Scout. Formerly known by her previous codename Honey Badger, which is still sometimes fondly used by fans in reference to her character, just like Lara before her, Gabby Kinney also seems to be another character based in the Wolverine family who has the potential to be even more of a powerhouse than anyone who has come before her. Why? Because Gabby has something they don't have. She can't feel pain. For Wolverine, this has always been an interesting point. Sure, he can heal if he's hurt, has his limbs ripped off even, but at the end of the day, he has to feel every single wound he gets. The pain doesn't necessarily get easier with time. Wolverine always feels every second of it. In fact, this is also why some have theorized that Wolverine sometimes has memory problems as a result of mental and physical pain, which has in essence basically like scarred his brain, causing him to have issues with remembering his past and memory recall in general. I mean, he's also had his mind like literally scrambled a few times, but I'm sure the pain he's suffered also does have a role to play when it comes to his memory problems as well. Gabby, however, can't feel pain, which in ways makes her stronger. It means she can push herself even more, and that she likely won't have any brain trauma as a result of at least physical pain suffered, because, you know, she can't actually feel that, as opposed to X-23, now Wolverine, and Wolverine himself, Logan, who both can. But she does need to be careful about how she uses this power, as it also means Gabby could push herself too far and overdo it, putting herself physically in danger and leaving her on the brink of death, or just straight up dead as a result. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, we have more content for you. You can check out our most powerful playlist for more super powerful characters, if you're into that. Number 9, Jimmy Ultra Olsen. Jimmy Olsen! Oh my goodness, I could not do this list and not include everyone's favorite Superman sidekick, Jimmy, Superman's pal, as he's also fondly been known. In fact, there have been a few adventures where Jimmy has even seemingly rivaled his pal Superman in terms of his own power levels. Case in point, there was a time when Jimmy Olsen inherited half of a medallion from his father. Having found the other half with Superman, Jimmy found that when the pieces were combined, they basically made him super powerful, even more powerful than Superman. And this was made evident in the issue of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, issue 129, 1989, when due to a misunderstanding and some blackmail, the two of them are forced to fight each other. But as always, everything worked out in the end. This medallion is sadly no longer around in the comics, it had to be destroyed, but the stories involving it still stand as a testament to one of the times that Jimmy was more powerful than Supes himself. Number 8. War Machine. While Tony Stark might be one of the smartest men in the Marvel Universe, that doesn't mean that he can master every element of what it takes to be a hero. On the contrary, there are a lot of areas where Iron Man could actually probably use some improvement, to be honest. After all, Tony spent most of his life growing up in the lap of luxury, and while he still always had his own trials and tribulations as a person, he didn't necessarily have the same life experiences as, say, someone like James Rhodes. War Machine is, in fact, simply better at fighting and tactics in the field, I would say, than Tony is, due to his extensive military training and his career. You also need to add in the fact that Iron Man wasn't necessarily a pilot, at least I don't believe he was in the beginning in the comics, unless I'm missing something, when he started piloting his own Iron Man suit. Whereas Rhodey started already having like a bunch of experience and training in that area, so he actually started off with a pretty good understanding of how to best utilize his suit and fly it around. He also tends to wear armor more that's application is more focused specifically on fighting. So in a way, he is more powerful than Tony if we're talking fighting prowess, I'd say. Number 7. Kate Pryde. Kate Pryde isn't really a sidekick per se. I mean, with Marvel, there are very few sidekicks, but for a time, you could maybe have considered her one, if you will. She was Wolverine's young pal during a time when he had an almost constant stream of younger, well, for lack of a better term, sidekicks, who he would often team up, help to train, take care of, and at the end of the day were kinda like little sisters often to him. Kate is among these select few, and to be honest, she's in pretty good company. I love how Wolverine is one often shown to be a good mentor to younger mutants, despite the fact that he often would swear himself that he's such a lone wolf, and I also love that 2, he's had a hand in helping to shape and train some of the most powerful female mutants around, of which I would consider Kitty Pryde to be one. Kate's powers allow her to phase, and over the years she has become a master in her abilities. While not yet considered to be Omega level, I'm actually surprised that she hasn't made that cut yet. When it comes to phasing, I would say she's probably one of the most gifted mutants around that we have, and I would say that with her phasing abilities, there's not much that she can't do with them. And we talk about her power levels so little in the comics, I'm not even fully sure if she's even considered alpha, though I'd at least consider her to be alpha tier myself. So I hope she is. I don't know, I can't find that information. If you have that information, let me know in the comments. She should at least be alpha tier to me. Number 6. Wally West. Wally West is in fact faster than Barry Allen, and pretty much everyone knows it at this point. And if you don't know it, well, now you do. And if you're refusing it, you might just be in denial, my friends. I'm just going to say it. While there might be some areas where Barry excels more than Wally, for the most part, Wally West being faster makes him generally more powerful than Barry Allen. This is because Barry and Wally both get their powers from speed. So being faster literally translates to more power, as speed is used to fuel many of the things that they can do, their powers. Wally West, however, wasn't always the Flash. Before that, he was Barry's sidekick known as Kid Flash. And even then, he showed great promise and potential, which he obviously delivered on when he grew up and himself took up the mantle, following in his uncle's footsteps, and then of course outrunning those footsteps. Number 5. Revolution. Formerly known as Winter Soldier and Captain America, it's Buchanan Bucky Barnes, Steve Rogers' pal and former sidekick during World War II times. I mean, especially if we're talking Marvel Cinematic Universe here, I think we have to acknowledge that Bucky Barnes' Winter Soldier had simply more oomph than Steve. Now granted, in Civil War, Steve is also trying to hold back because he doesn't want to hurt Bucky, but this is still a character who is shown in live action to be able to hold off both Iron Man and Captain America at the same time. In the comics, some would also argue that Bucky Barnes ends up as a better Captain America than even his protege and the original superhero that he sidekicked for, Steven Rogers. So, whichever way you're looking at this one, Bucky at the very least has the potential to be more powerful than Steve all around, and possibly even more influential, I'd say. I personally also think having a metal robot arm kind of gives him an arm up on the competition, if you will. I mean, his one arm is is always going to be more powerful than Steve's two together because, you know, it's robotic and insanely powerful. Basically, like, if we're talking arm wrestling competitions, I think Bucky is more powerful for sure with robo arm. Man, I wish I had a robot arm so I could just destroy everyone in arm wrestling competitions. I would totally get a robot arm for that. Number 4, John Kent. There are some who might want to fight me on this one, but at the end of the day, honestly, it's kind of the truth. So we can discuss it if you want. We can fight me. Let's fight. Let's go. John Kent is the son of Superman's Clark Kent and Lois Lane. Like his dad, he is also a superhero and also uses the Superman mantle. And it's also been proven based on tests that Batman has run that John himself has more potential than even his dad does in terms of his power levels. As a straight up hybrid Kryptonian and Terran baby, he also has more agency when it comes to his home of Earth, which means that he's a lot more comfortable sort of getting involved with Earth's issues and helping to combat them head on. Clark, on the other hand, has always kind of struggled with this because although he does live on Earth, he's not technically from the planet, so he tends to like create a little bit of distance, maintain a little bit of boundaries in regards to like what kind of issues he feels comfortable getting involved with, in comparison to John, who really is just kind of like, no, like Earth is my home, like let's do it. And while some may want to argue that John simply will never be able to beat Superman, I've never really understood this logic or this defensiveness surrounding that topic. As John's dad, it's only logical that Clark would actually want his son to be better than he is as time goes on, and to see him succeed and improve upon basically everything Clark himself has learned and done. Isn't that what most parents want for their children? So as fans of characters, isn't that kind of what we should want for their kids? I don't know. I just feel like we should consider what Superman would want for John and then kind of take that into consideration if we're a Superman fan. Number 3, Rogue. In the Fox films, Rogue and Wolverine have more of like a father-daughter relationship, and it's for that reason that I'm including them here, even though sometimes they still had kind of creepy romantic moments, possibly inspired by their creepy romantic moments from the comics that they sometimes have, where they're less father-daughter and more, I mean, kind of just two people that didn't like each other and then did like each other and then had some sort of weird deep-seated lust for each other that we never really fully explored. But anyways, Rogue and Wolverine for the most part are given a father-daughter, mentor-mentee relationship in the films. Rogue's powers, however, I would say are just way more epic than Wolvie's. He has a healing factor, but it's also a power that Rogue can literally adopt, can literally just take from him if she wants. In fact, Rogue can literally adopt any mutant power just by coming into physical contact with another mutant. In the films, however, she isn't quite at the level she currently is in the comics in terms of her control over this. So the only major downside here is that, you know, she accidentally often hurts those she loves when she uses her powers because she can't really fully control them. So Rogue is actually more wary of even utilizing them in combat, and even at one point basically tries to get rid of her powers altogether because of how cursed her powers make her feel. However, this does not diminish the fact that her abilities, regardless of how wild they are or how much she kind of is wary of using them, are just simply more OP than Wolverine's. And that's saying something too, because Wolverine at times can be extremely OP himself, so no disrespect to Wolverine, just, I mean, Rogue's crazy, you know what I mean? Rogue's on another level to me. Number 2, Tempest. Tempest is insanely OP in comparison to Aquaman, and that's not even me trying to take a swing at Aquaman. While he's been the butt of many jokes in the past, I actually think that Aquaman himself is a vastly underrated character, so I'm not knocking him, I'm just saying the facts. Because of course, that being said, Garth, who is known as Tempest currently in the comics but was previously known as Aqualad, the sidekick of Aquaman, just has more going on than his predecessor. Tempest not only has all the powers that he gets from being an Atlantean, but is also well versed in the world of magic as well. He can cast spells, and in the past has also been shown to be able to control certain elements, teleport, and even turn himself invisible, so yeah. Number 1, Storm. It's weird to think about this one, but at one point Storm was kind of like Gambit's sidekick, which feels so random now in the present day, but I still love it. This was during the time when Storm became temporarily de-aged and basically became like the thief Gambit's apprentice, his little apprentice thief, which is pretty wild to think about. That 1, Storm trained with Gambit, and that 2, the pair actually have kinda like a really close bond because of this. One that rarely gets showcased, let alone mentioned, despite the fact that they had such a fun dynamic on their adventures together back in the day. Once Storm regained her memories while in her de-aged teenager form, she was actually the one to bring Gambit to the X-Men, having finally remembered them. And this was how Gambit would ultimately join up with the team, which is also pretty wild and cool to think about. Storm would eventually return to her normal age, and I would say is hands down way more powerful than Gambit is now. Granted, once again, not to knock Gambit, because you know I love him. But this is also a duo that I would love to see return to action together for another team-up series. Because, yeah, it's just such a fun time. And why can't we have them do that in present day? You know what I mean? Anyways, what I'm saying is you should also go back and you should read the Gambit miniseries that just came out, where we get to follow them while they're teamed up together. It's super cute. I still have to read the final issue, but so far so good.
Number 10. Scarlet. When Jason Todd's Red Hood first returned from the dead, he was much more villainous than he has since become. Yes, he was a vigilante, but in the context of the stories he was appearing in, he was a Batman villain. In Battle for the Cowl, he even tried to murder both Tim Drake and Dick Grayson. After Dick Grayson became the new Batman while Bruce Wayne was dead, Jason created a more flamboyant Red Hood costume and even took on a sidekick to help him in his insane and murderous war on crime. Sasha, otherwise known as Scarlet. Sasha was the daughter of one of Professor Pig's henchmen, who tried to leave Gotham when things were getting too intense. Pig found out about this and decided to capture the man and his daughter and turn them into members of his Dollatron minions. This process involved disfiguring surgeries and brainwashing. Her father was converted, but Pig was stopped before the process could be completed on her. She smothered her father in prison and was rescued by Jason, who took her on as his murderous sidekick. This career was short-lived, and she is not as effective as other sidekicks. However, she did manage to defeat and capture Damian Wayne through a strategic use of a taser and a knife. When Jason was defeated by Batman and Robin, Scarlet fled town, never to be seen again. Number 9. Harley Quinn. Harleen Quinzel was a psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum who fell in love with one of her patients, the Joker. He manipulated her into breaking him out of prison and joining him in a lifestyle of murder and mayhem. Harley meant nothing to the Joker, but he was able to use his manipulation skills to keep her around for years, being his most consistent and trusted assistant. She took on his clown gimmick as her own, through makeup or by a dip in a chemical bath, depending on the continuity. Despite being a psychiatrist, Harley is a skilled martial artist and acrobat, being able to defeat most of the foes she comes across with relative ease. She eventually realized how toxic her relationship with Joker was and went out on her own, eventually becoming more of an anti-hero at this point. Joker has since taken on a new protege, Punchline, but really, she's just a replacement Harley that DC created because they couldn't use Harley as a straight-up villain anymore, so why talk about it? Number 8. Talia al Ghul. Daughter of the infamous League of Assassins leader Ra's al Ghul, Talia witnessed the death of her mother and was put in the care of her father. Together, they traveled the world, and Talia was trained by her father to emulate his skills and intellect. She eventually fell in love with Batman, and Ra's orchestrated a false abduction of her and Robin in order to test Batman's skills and see if he would be a suitable heir. Batman, of course, refused to join forces with Ra's despite his feelings for Talia. Talia eventually became the heir and would go on to become the leader of the League of Assassins whenever Ra's is dead. Her and her father have a tense relationship due to her conflicting allegiances and his willingness to sacrifice her for the greater good if needed. She is the mother of Damian Wayne, Batman's biological son and the current Robin. Speaking of which, number 7. Injustice Nightwing. In the Injustice universe, Superman snaps and becomes a real dictator. He decides that criminals cannot be allowed to live and sets about exterminating them. When he gets to Arkham Asylum to end the lives of its inmates, Superman is confronted by Batman, Damian's Robin, and Dick Grayson's Nightwing. Damian has always been the most bloodthirsty of the Robins since he was raised by assassins, and he actually has a higher body count than even the Red Hood. So perhaps it shouldn't be too surprising that he actually agreed with Superman that the criminals should be destroyed. This led to an argument with Nightwing that resulted in Damian throwing one of Nightwing's weapons at him. Damian expected him to dodge, but Dick was distracted because of the massive prison break that was happening, and it hit him in the head. He fell to the ground and broke his neck. Batman blamed Damian for Dick's death, you know, because it was entirely his fault, and this led to their relationship becoming damaged to the point of no return, and Damian was taken under Superman's wing, and he eventually took up his fallen brother's mantle as the new Nightwing. This Damian considers Superman more of a father than Bruce ever was, but this is actually just a manipulation on Superman's part to get an ally who is well suited for helping him take out Batman. This is evidenced by how Superman sent the mass murderer Victor Zsasz after Alfred, knowing that Batman's refusal to kill Zsasz even after the death of Alfred would destroy any chance they had of fixing their relationship and solidify Damian's loyalty to him. Number 6. Karai. Last time I talked about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I got their names and weapons mixed up, because honestly, I never got into them as a kid, since, you know, the cartoon stopped airing when I was 2, so I'll have to be careful with this one. Karai in the original comics is a agent of the Foot who comes to New York after the death of the Shredder and sorta takes things over. When the 2003 animated series, which I also never watched because I was strictly a Batman kid growing up, when that series came out, Karai was given more backstory. The audience learned that she was Shredder's adopted daughter who he had taken in and raised after she was abandoned by her parents. He trained her in ninjutsu and she became his most trusted follower, eventually being put in charge of the Japanese Foot Clan. In her appearances in other media in the years since, this new backstory is sometimes adopted, but it's interesting that her status as Shredder's sidekick or co-worker really just depends on which version you're exposed to. In the 2012 animated series, she can also spit venom and transform into a snake girl, so that's kind of fun. Number 5. Terra. Terra Markov was a member of the Teen Titans, but unbeknownst to her teammates, she was actually the protege of the team's arch-nemesis, Deathstroke. She was feeding information to Deathstroke, which he used to capture the Titans, but when Deathstroke's son, Jericho, used his powers of possession to use Deathstroke to free the Titans, Terra thought she was being betrayed by her mentor and snapped, collapsing the hive complex they were in down around her and crushing herself to death. Terra had the power of geokinesis, which means that she could earthbend. She used this power to throw rocks, which she could also sharpen to deadly points with her mind, and could even cause earthquakes at will. She could use this power to rip rock or earth from the ground, which she would stand on and cause to fly at great speeds, giving her the power of flight. Years after her death, she was made a member of the Black Lantern Corps, and her zombified corpse returned to life with the powers of a Black Lantern ring in addition to her usual power set. Number 4. Dex-Starr. Dex-Starr started life as a stray cat in Brooklyn. He was adopted by a woman who took him in and gave him a pretty wonderful life full of love and yarn. When his owner passed away in a home invasion gone wrong, Dex found himself back on the streets. When two rather cruel humans decided to have some fun by putting him in a sack and throwing him off of a bridge, a Red Lantern ring, sensing the rage in the cat's heart, granted Dex the powers of a Red Lantern. Dex-Starr has since become a regular member of the Red Lantern Corps and is probably the most powerful cat in the DC universe. And don't underestimate him. He is extremely brutal and violent and is responsible for the deaths of several humans, a Yellow Lantern, and at least one Black Lantern. Although he has sworn vengeance for the life of his original owner, he still enjoys a good cuddle from his new master, Atrocitus. Despite Atrocitus's typical brutality, he shows a real soft spot for his cat, often referring to him as a good kitty, and flying into a rage if anyone hurts him. Normally I'd say this makes Dex a pet, not a sidekick, but I think he qualifies as both. I mean, Superboy's sidekick for years was Krypto the Superdog, so I think this counts. Number 3. Inertia. Thaddeus Thawne is a clone made up of Thawne and Bart Allen's DNA in the 30th century. His power is to slow down time around him, giving him the appearance of super speed. He operates as an independent villain for the various Flashes, even managing to kill Impulse before being captured by Wally West, who slowed him down to the point where he was essentially a statue, which Wally then put on display at the Flash Museum, forced to look at a statue of the speedster hero he'd killed for the rest of time. He was eventually freed by Hunter Zolomon, aka Zoom. Zoom then took Inertia under his wing, renaming him Kid Zoom. Although very powerful, his time as Kid Zoom was cut short when he killed Weather Wizard's son, resulting in the Rogues teaming up and taking him out with extreme prejudice. Number 2. Christoph Vernard. When Dr. Doom returned to Latveria in Fantastic Four number 247, he discovered that a revolution had taken place, and he had been replaced by a man named Zorba Fortunov. He came across a young boy named Christoph and his mother, who were still loyal to their former leader. Christoph's mother was killed by a robot, and once he had regained control of his homeland, Dr. Doom took in Christoph, raised him, and eventually made him his heir. Christoph is a super genius, much like his teacher, having a knowledge of science and magic that apparently rivals even the original Doom. When Doom was killed in battle, Christoph was made the new Dr. Doom, but the Doom bots transferred Doom's memories into Christoph, making him think that he was the real Doom. This of course led to trouble when the real Doom returned, and upon defeating Christoph, Doom had him deposed and sent into exile. But the two eventually patched things up, with Christoph stepping in as as Latveria's interim leader whenever Von Doom is unavailable. Number 1. Nimona. Nimona is the lead character of the graphic novel of the same name by N.D. Stevenson. It tells the story of a young girl who decides that she wants to be the sidekick of the greatest villain in the realm, Ballister Blackheart. She has magical powers that allow her to shapeshift. She can use this power to disguise herself as someone else, or to become any animal she wants. She's only limited in the fact that the animal has to be a real creature, but that's not much of a limit, as she lives in a world where dragons are real. She also has an incredible healing factor, having healed arrow wounds and a decapitated head with little to no trouble. The story soon goes in a direction where it is clear that Blackheart and Nimona are operating as villains in order to liberate their homeland from an evil dictatorship, which of course opens up a lot of thematic ideas of what actually makes people villains, but it is a cool read that has been adapted into an animated Netflix film which is scheduled to be released sometime this year.